Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rafaele Chappe, and I'm one of Willi's former students. It's truly an honor to be part of this celebration today to reflect on and recognize Professor Willi Semmler's remarkable academic and professional career. As I was preparing these remarks, I spent some time thinking about the impact of Willi's teaching, research, and mentorship, both in the classroom and well beyond it. And I'd like to share a few of those reflections with you. So let me start with a bit of background, memory lane. I arrived at the new school as a full-time econ student in the fall of 2008. And shockingly, this was 17 years ago. I had to pinch myself when I did the math. It was a time of chaos. Lehman Brothers had just collapsed. AIG was on the brink. The financial system was unraveling before our eyes. And Willi was the first person I met at the department reception. I remember standing there on this floor with a plate of cheese and a glass of wine, talking to him about mortgage-backed securities. That's a fun cocktail party topic, which at the time, unlike wine and cheese, was actually a relatively new concept to most people. People were trying to figure out what those things were. And what struck me immediately was Willi's openness and generosity, his genuine curiosity about me, my background, what brought me to economics. I just quit my job working as a tax attorney at a large investment bank, and I was a bit older than many of the older students. So from Wall Street to the new school in 2008 was quite the transition. And little did I know the wheels were already turning, because maybe a month later, I found myself co-authoring a paper with Willi, a memorandum on a new financial architecture and new regulations, alongside an incredible team, including Teresa Ghilarducci, Ed Nell, and others. And it was a call for a more sustainable and equitable financial system. And even now, it feels just as relevant, if not more, than it did back then. And that's one of Willi's true gifts. He has a remarkable instinct for spotting opportunities for meaningful collaborations. And just as importantly, he has the generosity to include students in them. I hadn't yet figured out where Joe's Coffee was, what Café Lou was, but somehow I had already co-authored my first paper with Willi. I also remember the same first reception. Willi told me about a book he'd recently published. This is a book that was already referred to.
Your way. Give it down.
Down, yeah? Down.
No.
Okay, here's the book. Asset prices, booms, and recessions. And this, I think there's a more recent edition, but that's the edition that I worked with. And this book became my introduction to his work on asset price volatility, dynamic portfolio decisions, multi-agent models, beyond consumption-based models, all these ideas that stayed with me and deeply shaped my own dissertation on wealth distribution and portfolio choice. And of course, I learned all the building blocks of financial theory from Willi, who was teaching a class. Over the years, we co-authored several papers on a range of topics, such as Ponzi finance, hedge fund behavior, systemic risk, regulatory reform, the US financial culture of risk. And looking back, so much of that was shaped by 2008 and our attempt to make sense of a system under stress and to imagine policy responses that might actually help. But Willi's mentorship extended far beyond co-authoring papers. He's always had an incredible ability to build networks, and not just intellectual communities, but full ecosystems of support for his students. He opened doors, he flagged opportunities I never would have known about, and he helped me build the confidence to walk into rooms that might have felt intimidating. I remember traveling with him to a conference at the Deutsche Bundesbank in Frankfurt, very formal setting. And here's a little anecdote. One of the reviewers made a rather snarky comment about our paper, saying something like, "This is like a phoenix. It needs to die and be reborn." Ouch. I was ready to jump out the window. I look at Willi, unfazed, cool as a cat, and handled it with total calm and confidence, turning the criticism on its head. And I can only describe that as like academic ninja move. Very powerful. Also, and this is important, the same trip is when Willi introduced me to the Flammkuchen. And here it is, which is basically what happens when German efficiency meets French indulgence and Italian pizza. And it became clear very quickly that Willi had not only mastered macroeconomic modeling, but also the art of finding the best food within a 20-block radius of any central bank. What I've always admired most about Willi is that he never treated economic theory as abstract or disconnected from reality. For him, economics has always been about the real world, about policies that matter, risks that affect lives, crises that demand thoughtful, creative responses. And nowhere is that more apparent than in his work on climate change. For decades, Willi has been a pioneer in the space. Long before climate change was a mainstream topic in economics, he'd explored the deep connections between ecological stress, financial markets, macroeconomic stability. His work has tackled transition risks, asset pricing under climate stress, low carbon investment strategies and tipping point dynamics, and policy tools that can guide economies toward sustainability. And he's asked hard questions that were inspiring to me. How do we integrate climate risk into financial modeling, and what happens to stability under extreme weather scenarios, and how do we rethink growth when ecological limits are real? And he didn't stop with the theory. He brought these insights and into policy spaces, collaborating with institutions like the IMF, the European Central Bank, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. And he also convened important conversations here at the New School, including conferences I and many other students had the pleasure to help organize, including in the aftermath of Fukushima. Willi has so many publications, it's impossible to name them all, but I did want to show a few things. Clearly, I cannot master these. Here is the Oxford Handbook of the Macroeconomics of Global Warming, which he co-edited with Lucas Bernard. Willi kindly offered me the chance to contribute to this book with a chapter on global environmental governance from a legal perspective, something which really reflects Willi's deep commitment to interdisciplinary work. Throughout the years, Willi has consistently made space for his students, for voices from different fields, from newer scholars. Here's a more recent book that we also referred to. Oh, we're back to the pizza. Oh. Oh. Here we go. Sustainable Macroeconomics, Climate Risks, and Energy Transitions with Unra Niambu, another New School alum, continuing his work to bridge theory, empirics, and policy in this crucial area. And so, Willi, you've shown us that scholarship doesn't have to sit on a shelf. It can move in the world. It can ask urgent questions. It can demand better answers. You've helped build a generation of economists who care not only about the how, but also about the why, who approach economics not just as a set of tools, but as a way to engage with the world responsibly and thoughtfully. And so, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for your guidance, your generosity, your vision, and your unwavering commitment to ideas that matter. I feel incredibly lucky to have had the chance to learn from you, not just as a scholar, but as a human being. Congratulations on this milestone, Willi. I know retirement won't slow you down. Maybe just give you a little more time for Flammkuchen.
Thanks, Rafaele. It's great. Lefteris, we need to conjure you onto the screen before we can start. So, Kendrick, can you?
I don't know what to do.
Don't worry, we can hear you. We're just going to make sure that we can also see you.
Okay. I don't have something to share.
There we are.
So
now we can see and hear.
Okay, thank you. Well, it is certainly an honor to be invited to this gathering today, tonight for me, because it's already night here, to celebrate the remarkable career and contributions of our dear teacher, friend, and colleague, Professor Willi Semmler. As you may know, I'm a graduate from the New School for Social Research, and I had the good fortune to attend Willi's courses during his very first semesters in the early 1980s. Over the past 40 plus years, I've maintained a close connection with him, and today I have the opportunity to express my deep appreciation for his extraordinary academic career. Let me begin by recalling that I attended his lectures, or rather courses, on public finance and political economy, subjects that later became areas of my concentration. Willi had already made significant contributions, particularly through his article on the classical theory of taxation, if he recalls it now, which was an insightful work that, in my view, deserves even more attention in today's turbulent times than it did back then, because there was a clear distinction between intermediate goods and final goods, and their effects on relative prices and economic growth and all these kinds of things that were inspired by the classical economists Ricardo, Marx, etc. So this kind of work is more relevant today than it was those years. And so public finance and the classical theory of taxation became the subject of my dissertation, which Willi supervised. During those years, I attended with distinct interest Willi's work on classical and Schumpeterian theories of competition. I must say, part of my current research has been inspired by his insights in these areas. His rigorous studies on the theories of value and distribution made a lasting impact, and from the mid-1980s onward, I closely followed his explorations on cross-dual dynamics, technological change and unemployment, nonlinear dynamics, long cycles, and more recently, environmental economics and sustainable growth. On a personal note, I confess, I never imagined that a moment like this would come, where I would be invited to celebrate the retirement of my old professor and mentor. As I often say, real-life scenarios surpass in imagination even the most imaginative Hollywood screenwriters. And so here I am, now a recently retired professor, myself, celebrating the retirement of someone who has shaped my intellectual journey so profoundly. Beyond the academic sphere, I have been fortunate to share many enriching moments with Willi over the years in Greece, of course in New York during the Easterns, but also in Greece during especially challenging times for the Greek and the broader European Union economies. I recall his presentation at an international conference in my hometown, Thessaloniki. I believe that was the year 2018, after which we had some time to visit the city together. He returned later the same year as a keynote speaker at the University of Macedonia, and we again spent some meaningful time. There are two moments that stand out vividly in my memory. And the first was during our visit to the landmark of Thessaloniki, which is its White Tower, when the ticket officer asked if either of us was over 65. And to my dismay, she looked directly at me. And by that, I want to say that although I'm 10 years or more younger than Willi, he continues to look very young. The second was Willi's lively recollection of his first trip to Greece in the early 1970s during his own, I would say, if I may, roaring 20s, driving an NSU car from Germany down to Greece. I had no doubt about the spirit of that story. It became even clearer to me when we went out for a drink and he ordered a Campari and soda, the iconic drink of the early 1970s. I'm also delighted to say that Willi has been invited as a keynote speaker at a conference organized by Aristotle University in Thessaloniki this coming August, and I look forward to welcoming him once again and to spending some, I hope, vacationing time by the nearby beaches. Knowing Willi, I can say with confidence that this is not a farewell. I do not believe he is truly retiring. His research in economics is far from over. He will continue doing research, write, engage, and inspire us all in the unique and thoughtful ways he always has. So, dear Willi, thank you for your mentorship. There is no doubt that it was crucial and certainly enriched my life. I wish you good health, happiness, and the joy doing exactly what you love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lefteris. That was great.
Thank you.
Christian, we're just going to get your slides onto the screen.
All right. Shall I start? Okay. Yeah, then good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Should I take this one? All right. Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to speak at this event to celebrate Willi's academic oeuvre and to meet so many old friends and colleagues. Thank you, Will and Mark, for organizing this event, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. This means a lot to me because Willi has been one of the most influential persons in my academic life. Very early in my career, while advising me on my master's thesis at Bielefeld University in Germany, Willi encouraged me to go to my very first academic conference, I think it was in London, to present my work, still as an MA student, and that experience really hooked me into academia. Later, in 2006, when I was a PhD student still at Bielefeld University, Willi invited me to come to the New School for the first time, accompanying my main PhD advisor, Peter Flaschel, who was to hold the renowned Theodor Heuss professorship for the fall 2006 term back then. That was a unique experience for me that would change my life forever. Indeed, 4 years later, motivated by the unique academic atmosphere that I had experienced here at the New School in 2006, I applied to an open position as an assistant professor of economics here at NSSR and Eugene Lang College. Unexpectedly, at least for me, I was appointed and moved to New York City in 2010. And from the very first day, Willi guided me through the US system, both inside as well as outside the New School. And along the way, we became close collaborators, and if I may say so, also good friends. And of course, I was not the only one who enjoyed his support. Many of us in this room would not be where we are now without Willi's continued support. Above all, Willi has been a true inspiration for us all in terms of creativity and productivity. As long as I know him, now indeed more than 25 years, Willi has always been working on many different fields like macroeconomics, finance, climate change, nonlinear dynamics, and many others, always looking for new perspectives and new methods with which he may explain important economic phenomena. As I learned recently, Willi is working on a new manuscript on machine learning and macroeconomic modeling as we speak. We all know how broad Willi's interest and work have been and still are, so I will restrain myself to discuss some of our joint work on empirical macroeconomics and macroeconomic modeling. By the way, this is Bielefeld University where we met. Okay. All right. So, as you all know, Willi, me, and other colleagues such as Rainer Franke, Puchen, who also taught at the New School for some time, and the late Peter Flaschel, have worked extensively on the development of medium-scale disequilibrium macroeconomic models for the last 20 years. Indeed, the use of advanced mathematical modeling techniques has been one of the defining features in Willi's work. In this context, his co-authored 1997 MIT book was extremely influential for me because it illustrated quite clearly the flaws of mainstream rational expectations economics and how insightful nonlinear dynamics could be. In the appraisal of this book, Nobel laureate James Tobin wrote, "Macrodynamics is a venerable and important tradition which 50 or 60 years ago engaged the best minds of the economics profession, among them Frisch, Tinbergen, Harrod, Higgs, Samuelson, Goodwin. Recently, it has been in danger of being swallowed up by rational expectations, moving equilibrium, and dynamic optimization. We can be grateful to the authors of this book for keeping alive the older tradition while modernizing it in the light of recent developments and in techniques of dynamic modeling." But for Willi, paraphrasing Immanuel Kant, theory without empirics is empty, and empirics without theory is blind. His 2006 Elsevier book, Quantitative and Empirical Analysis of Nonlinear Dynamic Macromodels, and the 2008 Springer book, Topics in Applied Macrodynamic Theory, which I also co-authored, extended the nonlinear analysis of, let's say, heterodox models by Willi and his co-authors with state-of-the-art econometric techniques in a manner not found anywhere else back then. Among other techniques, we employed system GMM, meaning generalized method of moments, for the estimation of wage price dynamics, taking the identification issue much more seriously than other colleagues back then. In the appraisal of the 2008 book, Giancarlo Gandolfo wrote, "Tired of the rational agent in the temporally optimizing model? Then this is the book for you, a book on macroeconomics in the Keynesian without any new, post, neo, or other prefix tradition. Fan of this approach? Then this is the book for you. It shows how it is possible to study dynamics without jumping on stable arms or manifolds. A bonus is the econometric study of the theories set forth by the authors. All macroeconomists should read this book." Together with Carl Chiarella and Peter Flaschel, the leading figures of the Bielefeld School, he developed for almost a decade what they called the trilogy, right? Every time that we met, you were telling about the trilogy and when the trilogy will appear. And this was an attempt to reconstruct Keynesian macroeconomics from a dynamic, quite technical point of view, putting together the research of more than 20 years. Despite the highly technical level of his modeling, this one should be, modeling work, Willi's research has always been quite close and relevant to current policy debates. For example, in our 2014 Journal of International Money and Finance article, Financial Stress, Sovereign Debt, and Economic Activity in Industrialized Countries, we tested by means of nonlinear dynamic panel threshold regression methods if and how government indebtedness affected output growth. Our findings strongly contradicted the famous, or I could say infamous, 2010 AR paper by Reinhardt and Rogoff, where they suggested that a 90% debt to GDP ratio was the magical threshold beyond which economic crisis would unfold. Our econometric results showed that such a threshold could not be found in the data, and that government debt is only relevant if financial stress is sufficiently high, but not otherwise. These findings questioned the meaningfulness of the fiscal austerity policies implemented, for example, in Europe. This work is a perfect example of Willi's approach, tackling a relevant question with state-of-the-art theoretical and empirical modeling techniques that could account for relevant nonlinearities, an aspect often missed in both mainstream as well as heterodox works. His vision led him work on the macroeconomics of climate change, as Rafaele pointed out earlier, much earlier than many colleagues, and he developed a research agenda that has been quite influential in places like the World Bank. In this field, among other things, Willi questioned the relevance of models where agents had an infinite planning horizon, the standard approach in the climate economics literature. Instead, he used the so-called nonlinear model predictive control methodology, which allowed to assume realistically that agents had a finite planning horizon. This is not just a modeling technicality. It has far-reaching consequences regarding the costs and benefits of climate change and of climate action. Willi tried to get me work on this field back then, and I regret now that I was not too interested then. That was certainly one of the bad decisions in my career. To finalize, it is not possible to understand Willi's contributions to macroeconomics and to the New School and to all the other institutions where he has taught and done research without acknowledging the fact that he did not stick to a particular label in terms of modeling or school of thought throughout his career, and that he was indeed a wanderer between the mainstream and the heterodox worlds, looking always to contribute constructively to the debate and trying to make both sides more open to and understanding of alternative approaches. I believe this is a sign of true scholarship from which all his students and colleagues have profited significantly. In this sense, thank you, Willi, for your unwavering way of doing macroeconomics and for being an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you, Christian. Our next three speakers, Tony Bonen, Samar, Issa, and Ibrahim Tahri, will join us on Zoom. So, Tony, I hope you can hear me. We're just going to try to pull up your visual.
Very good. I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can.
Yeah. Super. Fantastic. Hi, everybody. I wish I could join in person. I had intended to, but fortunately didn't work out. Circumstances got away. But nevertheless, I'm really honored to be here, to be invited to celebrate Willi's very impressive career. I worked closely with Willi across a number of research projects, took most of his classes that he was offering at the time, and he was, of course, my PhD advisor. I left the New School about almost a decade ago. Also didn't really want to do the math on that, but here we are. And since then, I've been very lucky working various economic research roles outside of academics, more in the policy applied and risk departments. And there have been innumerable times where I have been working on something where I think, oh, this is just like one of these projects I worked on with Willi many years ago. It's come up repeatedly in my mind, particularly around our work related to climate change and climate change impacts, but also debt and financial dynamics, particularly on the household sector side, which I'll come back to in a minute. I think that really speaks to Willi's vision for focusing on research that's very critical, issues that remain relevant and models and approaches that will remain relevant for many years, even like in the case of climate change, we don't necessarily want it to. And I think that's really paid enormous dividends for me in my career, and I'm ever grateful for that. As Christian was just saying in his remarks, I think Willi's pragmatism to the research and dedication to getting the high quality results, insights that are relevant, I mean, has been a feature throughout all of this work that he's been doing. Others have mentioned Willi's generosity too and support for students, and that's certainly the true in my case as well. And the third thing that I'll talk about in just a minute as well is his efficiency and productivity, which are quite remarkable. But first, I want to start sort of at my journey at the New School. So prior to joining the New School to do the PhD in economics, I did a master's in international political economy, which I'm sure most folks know. That's much more on the political sciencey sort of side. That was really during the global financial crisis. I was very interested in real economy, financial market interactions, but came out of that without a really solid quantitative background or deep knowledge of how you apply models or econometrics even. So when I came to New School, I sort of naturally gravitated towards Willi and his work, given his focus on advanced analytic systems, complex systems, and nonlinear forecast methods, particularly around macrodynamics, optimization, control systems, and applying that to issues like climate change. And so through that, I worked with Willi and others, of course, on studying and understanding integrated assessment models, putting together some applications of the NMPC approach to climate change dynamics, which we published in some IMF working papers back then. Particularly that area of research has come up time and again in the work that I've been doing in Canada, both in the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, more recently in the research role that I'm in now, and always think back to how important and useful that was. And also a little bit like Christian as well, Willi was pushing me to focus my dissertation on climate change and macrodynamics. And in retrospect, I wish I had. I went in a slightly different direction on sort of financial dynamics because I was still quite interested in the global financial crisis. Nevertheless, I learned a lot from that area. And so I think that's been an exceptional gift that Willi has given to me through my years working with him. So I greatly appreciate that. On the efficiency side, I want to say I pride myself on being efficient and pretty close to good attention to detail, but I don't think I come anywhere close to Willi's. So I'll tell you this one brief story. In a class that I took with him, I spent a long time developing an asset and debt model for households focused on what was going on in the US during the global financial crisis versus Canada, where housing prices at that time were starting to get out of control, much worse since then, and look at the household dynamics using a dynamic stochastic equation, which is basically the extent that my math can ever get to. I spent months and months working on this paper, building the model, setting up the analysis, and sent it to Willi, very excited for his feedback on it. And I get an email from him that morning saying, I've received your paper, and I'm going to read it on the subway as I come in, and we'll meet later this afternoon. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little horrified. Like, I have spent months on this paper, and you're just going to read it on the subway where many things are going on, and how long are you on the subway anyways? Maybe 45 minutes. Anyway, we get to the new school, we meet in person, and lo and behold, not only has he read the entire paper and marked it up front to end, he's also found a conceptual error in my model that I need to correct and then spend time doing it. How he was able to do that on a New York subway, I don't know, but forever after that, I never questioned him. Whenever he was going to review something, give feedback, however he wanted to do it, had full faith in his ability to do that and catch what was actually most important. So moving on to what Willi also wanted me to talk about, which I wasn't necessarily going to, but Willi asked that I talk a little bit about how Canada and Canadians are responding to the Trump challenge. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it's obviously a hot topic here in Canada. Prior to 3-4 months ago, climate change policies were the biggest issues here in the country. One thing I wanted to mention in response to Bruce Greenwald's comments at the beginning about the idea of a large carbon tax that then's shared back equitably to households. I'm not exactly sure what he had in mind, but I do think that's quite similar to what Canada had introduced about 5 years ago. The Trudeau government introduced that, and it became the main political item that the Conservative Party has been focusing on for years now. The Axe the Tax slogan became the big issue that Conservatives were rallying around, even though the majority of households are getting net contributions back because of the payouts that happen due to the carbon tax that's happening at the point of sale of fossil fuel products and energy. Mark Carney, who recently became the interim prime minister, and we're going through an election right now, of course, first thing he did was to get rid of that, even though it was a rather effective policy, but it became very politically toxic. So that might be one of the reasons why that's not being implemented right now, but that's a bit of an aside. So now that Trump's been in office for about 3-4 months, it has completely upended the relationship between the two countries. Our close partnership goes back, of course, many, many decades. And I doubt anybody else watched the English language leadership debate last night among the leaders of the various parties here. But the response to how to deal with this new threat from the United States was the main topic of debate. Every leader there was saying we need to negotiate from a position of strength, have retaliatory tariffs, and it was more of a debate about what scale or size of these tariffs should be, not whether or not we should maybe back down, capitulate, and hope that we can get back to the status quo ante. I think everybody here sort of recognizes that. What is most remarkable, though, is, of course, the speed with which the trust between the two countries has been broken. I mean, I think Canadians are under no illusion about that. But we recognize our deep ties to folks in the United States through trade, familial ties, what have you. We recognize, I was talking to somebody earlier this week, that there are millions of decent, rational, kind Americans, and even though Trump won't be around forever, we won't be going back to what we had before. There will be trade, there will be deals, there will be integration and cooperation between the two countries, I have no doubt. But I suspect Canada will always be keeping one foot out the door or an eye on some kind of exit strategy. And that's something, frankly, a year ago was completely unthinkable. So here we are. So sorry for the aside on all of that in the Canadian situation, but I was asked by our honoree today. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying Willi's dedication to his students and high quality work, high quality research has been massively influential on everybody who's here. We've heard that already. And in my personal life, it's been massively influential as well. And I greatly appreciate all of that time and effort and dedication Willi gave to my work and my development when I was studying under him, whether that was in person in the office or on the subway, didn't really matter. It was always of the highest quality. So thank you very much, Willi.
Thank you very much, Tony. And good to know that Canada is still an independent country. Samar, you're up next. And I think that the technology means that if you start speaking, you'll appear on the screen.
I'm here. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I was looking forward to being in person. Unfortunately, a travel came up last minute. So sorry, I'm on Zoom, but here I am. So it's really a privilege and very emotional at this moment to speak after everyone, after what I heard, and I echo everybody else's words. But it is really an honor to honor someone whose impact on my personal, academic, and professional life is truly big. I first met Professor Semmler as a master's and doctoral student at the new school, and I was full of ambition, but I was uncertain how to bring together my deep interest in the banking system and the financial system, and my growing curiosity about topics in macroeconomics. And just like Rafaele said, I had the very similar experience. It struck me how curious he was about my own experience switching from working in the banking system and my 5 years at the UN and switching to joining the new school. And what I found in Professor Semmler was way more than a professor. I found a mentor, a collaborator, and a very strong intellectual guide who didn't just teach concepts, but also taught us perspective. He really cared about this is how I felt, and I'm sure everybody else in this room felt the same way. He cared about our future, about high quality research. And he is one of those rare minds who bring together both mathematical rigor and deep moral clarity to the field of economics. His teaching, especially in advanced econometrics, financial economics, climate economics, opened my eye to the connected nature of markets and policy. His focus on financial fragility and banking systems and dynamics, and later on, increasingly, the economics of climate change, anticipated like big questions of how questions of our time, but also like continue to inform them today. And as a teacher, I still remember Professor Semmler's classes. He had the kind of clarity that really cuts through noise, and always with lots of positivity and a sense of humor. I've always taught personally classes at the new school based on whether I thought the topic seemed interesting and engaging, and whether or not Professor Semmler would be teaching the course, period. So this was my experience. I felt he never overcomplicated a model in the classroom and never simplified a policy implication. Whether in his lectures on endogenous cycles or his critiques of the DSGE models and frameworks, he invited us, his students, to think dynamically and ethically. He always encouraged me to dig deep and push myself to overcome learning curves. And he helped me develop an enthusiasm for finance and economic policy and look for insight, despite me initially being more interested in just the mathematical side. So that really helped me in my professional life. And I read every book Professor Semmler authored and co-authored, and I teach what I learned to my students now. To come to his approach to research, it's something that I carry with me every day as a finance professor. Professor Semmler doesn't research for novelty. He really researched for insight. I had the honor to publish with him and our joint paper on oil prices and banking instability, where we developed a jump diffusion model for bank capital structure, was one of the most intellectually rewarding experiences of my academic life. We extended the Stein model of over-leveraging to account for shocks in oil prices and political instability, building a richer understanding of how over-leveraging and systemic shocks unfold in both oil exporting and developed economies. And our paper was published in the Energy Journal, a top journal in the field. So this taught me how to reply to reviewers, and the experience truly impacted my confidence in research. He taught me how to react positively and confidently, and not to be discouraged when you receive really rough comments the way we received and the way we continue to receive every time we submit a paper. So that really helped me learn the process. And looking back now, especially in light of the evolving policy regime in Washington, D.C., our work seems visionary. The pendulum is swinging toward tighter regulation, renewed scrutiny on banks' capital buffers. And as debates intensify around macroprudential policies and credit allocation in a post-oil, post-pandemic world, the frameworks we built with Professor Semmler remain more relevant than ever. And I hope we write another paper together about these new developments, Professor Semmler. The intellectual influence doesn't stop with just one project or one co-authored paper. Even my solo papers, where I investigated the difference in over-leveraging between Islamic and conventional banks, corporations, even economies, were all rooted deeply in his model and teaching. The notion that excess debt, not just debt, is the true danger is something I first internalized and learned in his classroom and eventually with our research. And it changed how I understood the 2008 crisis and other crises and how I teach that to my own students today. In addition to that, and the new school, the NSSR, and the work with Professor Semmler brought me fruitful collaborations with other former students and similar students as well. And the process continues. For instance, my paper with Dr. Alexander Gevorkian, who is, I believe, in the room with you all today, is really a well-established professor, and another similar student. We wrote a paper together about optimal corporate leverage, and it was recognized with the 2023 Bright Idea Award, a prestigious and rigorous New Jersey award given to only 10 faculty. So this was, again, a direct extension of Professor Semmler's frameworks. By applying post-Keynesian and Minskian perspectives, we examined how speculative borrowing cycles develop and threaten macroeconomic stability. And Professor Semmler's emphasis on financial fragility and systemic risk through the lens of Minsky and Keynes was the foundation of that work. And let me say this, Professor Semmler's presence at the New School made this kind of integrative and socially responsible scholarship possible. The New School, with its legacy of heterodox economics and commitment to social justice, gave Professor Semmler a home, and through him gave people like me a path. His work serves as a bridge between rigorous modeling and real-world application, between classical traditions and contemporary crises. As I now teach and mentor students myself, I realize how much of Professor Semmler's voice echoes in my own. His clarity, his honesty, his refusal to shy away from uncomfortable truth in finance, whether it's the instability baked into corporate balance sheets or the vulnerabilities of the emerging economies facing climate shocks. His legacy is not only in his papers. So Professor Semmler, your legacy is definitely not only in your paper citations or policy impact, it's in the people you mentored and the questions you helped us frame. On behalf of every student who carries your influence into the classroom, boardroom, and research, I want to say a big thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your brilliant guidance and your generosity. I yet have to find someone who replies to an email faster than Professor Semmler, or who give feedback on a paper faster than him. Thank you for your time and mentorship, and for treating your students, who, by the way, we call ourselves Semmler kids, not just as learners, but as future scholars and collaborators. I owe so much of who I am today as an economics and finance professor and researcher to the seed you planted, and for that, I will always be grateful. You may be retiring, but your work continues through us, with us, and long for us. And as I said before, again, I hope you continue your wonderful work, and I hope to co-author one paper together soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samar. Our next speaker and the last on this particular panel is Ibrahim Tahri. Ibrahim, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful. We can see you as well. The floor is yours.
So thank you for for giving me the opportunity to also say some few words on Professor Semmler. Is actually something I will have to tell you for the whole audience. I've never been able to call Professor Semmler by his name because I couldn't. I have a high regard for him, and I've never he can witness that I've never called him by his name. But anyway, so let me first share some of the some slides there where I put some notes, and I also like to apologize for not being able to come in person, not because I have other commitments, but just because I was afraid from being subject to the randomness of the border officer in the US, given my last name, my first name, and also my job, which is a researcher in climate economics. So probably was not a good mix. Can you see the slides? All right, cool. So yeah, so my first, I like most of the speakers who already talked about first meeting with Professor Semmler. I met him, basically I wrote him an email back in the days 2009 already, asking about the possibilities to apply for a PhD position at the New School. Back then in 2009, I just got awarded the Fulbright scholarship, and I was very eager to study in New York. I applied to other schools in the US, but mostly in New York. And Professor Semmler responded to me in a friendly manner, and also encouraged me to apply as soon as possible to the New School. So this is my first encounter with Professor Semmler at the New School, basically via cold email, and that led to me to discover the field of economics mostly through him. So in my academic journey, I took, of course, many econ courses, but of course, I focused mostly on macroeconomics. So I took courses with Professor Semmler. First, I had to take a master level courses first, which among them is macroeconomics and international finance. And then later on, I took the advanced macroeconomics, just to remind that there were two advanced macroeconomics courses, one by the late Professor Taylor, and then one by Professor Semmler. And Semmler focused on mainstream macroeconomics. So if my memory serves me well. But I also, in addition to taking courses with Professor Semmler, I also taught courses with Professor Semmler. I was his TA for the course of financial economics. And actually, Samar actually was one of my students, if I remember right. So, and it was through this course that I developed an interest in financial economics. And from there, I mostly worked on that. So, but not only being a student and TA, I also published a number of papers with Professor Semmler. One of them is on current account imbalances. Basically, back then, when I was a student, there was this issue of the sovereign debt in the Eurozone, and that was of interest during my studies. And this is the first time where I also get to know the new methodology Professor Semmler was promoting at the school, which is basically the nonlinear model protective control. So basically, I'm not adding much since I'm the last one to talk, and then most of the things has already been said. So yes, I'm also one of the students who have used his approach on the nonlinear model predictive control method. But also I worked on empirical topics and Professor Kotz and Professor Semmler, we co-authored a paper on financial fragmentation and the monetary transmission mechanism in the euro area. And Professor Kotz earlier spoke about it. So it's the importance to study. Basically, it's the importance to study not only the monetary policy in a single regime, but in a or a multi-regime context. And we see that actually the monetary policy differs not only within countries, but also during periods of high uncertainty and low uncertainty. So, and finally, in another paper I co-authored with Professor Semmler is the Green Transition Investment Horizon and Dynamic Portfolio Decisions. This one also we applied NMPC, but actually I have to admit this is the one where I really understood the importance of an NMPC, because there we applied it for to illustrate the role of short-termism in investment decisions, and NMPC was quite a useful tool in that perspective. So yeah, and talking of climate finance, so after graduating from the new school, I went to Germany, where I held a postdoc position at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. And actually, this was thanks to Professor Semmler, who actually forwarded me the position call to which I applied. And thanks also to his very wonderful reference letter, I've been able to land an interview and eventually get the position. After that, after Germany, I went to now Vienna, where I work at the International Institute for Applied System Analysis, and I still work on the same topics related to climate economics, and I basically work on currently two projects. The Just Coal project is basically aims to study the welfare impact of coal phase out using dynamic modeling, and the other topic is multi-future, or the other object. The other project is multi-futures, and this one is a larger project in collaboration with other universities and research centers. And the goal is to design policy roadmaps for just, resilient, and climate neutral society. So that's basically my work with Professor Semmler. It's a lot of things has been already said. It's hard for me to say anything else other than Professor Semmler was very helpful, very attentive. And I think I hope I'm not wrong, he considered me as his son. He was very supportive in my career. And some of the best memories I share with Professor Semmler is the numerous dinners and breakfasts we had in Berlin, discussing politics, discussing economics, of course, and discussing projects and papers. So, and yeah, I mean, we also at some point we together went to the park, and then while I was running, he was doing gymnastics. So for those who are wondering why Professor Semmler looks young, I mean, he's quite active and athletic. So I'll be brief, and I say thank you for seeing the potential in my simple email. Also, thank you for demanding excellence, not perfection, and for being always supportive. And also thank you for being a compass, not just a critic. And the most important thing, I didn't write it, but thank you for indulging me, because I know I have been sometimes a pain in the ass, and I'm sorry for using this word, because I know that sometimes I don't respond quickly to emails, and I don't deliver on times sometimes. So yeah, thank you for being patient with me, and thank you again. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Great. So our final session of the afternoon features speakers from the non-academic world. Prakash Loungani actually joins us from Johns Hopkins now, but until recently he was assistant director at the IMF. Ekkehard Ernst is chief macroeconomist at the ILO, and Thomas Fisherman is coordinator for international economic reporting at Die Zeit. Do we have Prakash with us? Okay, so what I suggest is, I know Ekkehard is with us, so let's move ahead to Ekkehard, and we'll hope that Prakash joins us in the meantime. Ekkehard, if you begin speaking, I think the technology will.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks. Sure. Absolutely. I can hear you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. And good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I wanted to share a few words. I mean, I'm not as fortunate as the previous speakers. I'm not one of Semmler's kids, so I met him in a very different context. But I wanted to, express similar thoughts and gratitude that we already heard before. Let me start by first thanking the organizers to having me here and speaking in honor of Willi's long-standing academic career on both sides of the Atlantic, as we already heard, Bielefeld and New York, obviously. Quickly just for myself, my name is Ekkehard Ernst. I'm with the International Labour Organization, working on mega trends on labor markets and labor market forecasts. And in that context, also, I've been working with Willi quite intensively. But Willi and I met actually for the first time virtually when I was still way back in the early 90s, when I was still a master's student at the University of Saarbrücken in Germany. And at the time, I was very much fascinated by dynamic system theory as applied to economic problems. And I stumbled on one of Willi's papers, Willi's articles that he had published in the field. But I couldn't make much sense of one of his papers, I have to admit. I mean, as I said, I was still a master's student at the time, and I essentially lacked the tools to properly understand it. So what I did is I decided to pick up the phone and try to reach him here in New York. And to my surprise, he was there. He picked up the phone, and more importantly, he even went at great lengths to explain to me the intuition to his paper. So that was an amazing experience for me. Again, I mean, I was a young student at the time. I didn't really expect that a professor of his standing already at the time would really kind of take the time to talk to me and explain to me. So then we met again the following year at the conference in Vienna. In the meantime, I had finished my master's. I started my PhD in Paris. And we only briefly discussed at the conference, but exchanged on some ideas that eventually led to a series of papers that we co-authored over the years. I counted, just in preparation for this event today, I counted a total of 15 papers and various topics, including on resilience, structural reforms, on the role of credit constraints in dynamic models, as well as on the interaction between financial and labor markets more broadly. I was fortunate enough that our collaboration didn't stop at writing papers. We expanded beyond co-authoring, and really in particular supported me in putting together a number of workshops, conferences. We co-organized sessions together with the Econometric Society twice. He contributed significantly to a workshop that I managed to organize when I was at the time at the OECD on resilience and structural reforms. Actually, one of the papers that we presented at the time was co-authored with him. And recently, we put together a workshop on social mobility at the ILO. He was also instrumental, and unfortunately, Prakash is not here yet, but he probably still remembers that well. that we set up together with Christian as well, who is in the room, the first macro labor summer school that I co-designed together with colleagues from our International Training Center in Turin, where, you know, him, Christian, Prakash, and many others kind of presented and led to a successful series of this important training course that we at the ILO offered for our constituents, our members. Importantly, when I had just joined the ILO in 2008, he helped me in providing critical input to my research, both in terms of his personal collaboration projects around social and economic cost of climate change, but also helping me finding appropriate courses and consultants of my work. Actually, just recently, Willi was kind enough to introduce me to some of his former students, where we kind of managed to write some paper on climate finance. One of them, by the way, is still part of my team. His name is Daniel Samar, which some of you might actually know. While I had got to know Willi during the time when he worked intensively on dynamic systems theory, I only realized much later that the breadth of his research was much wider. During my PhD years, I had the privilege to spend some time at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst to work with Sam Bowles. And while I was working on my thesis, I stumbled on the book that was already mentioned earlier, on one of Willi's earlier publications on the institutional underpinnings of the German economy after 1945. A true gem, both in terms of its historical and economic analysis of the so-called German miracle, and closely related in both methods and analysis to research by the French Regulation School that some of you might know, and that I was much more familiar with at the time. When reading his earlier works, I realized just how much more and how much broader Willi's thinking was. It was truly impressive. Actually, looking through his Google Scholar profile, and you realize just how wide his research interests are. From Marxian pricing theories to questions of financing climate change to understanding the forces of economic growth, his 3 most cited papers cover a vast and varied field of interest that would be enough to fill 3 rather than 1 academic career. As if academic publishing, however, was not enough, Willi had and has a keen interest in making sure his research is relevant for policymakers, which is also why our collaboration continues to this day, because this input is really essential also for institutions like mine. For a long time, he has been or was a keen observer on the shortcomings of the German economy, publishing regular columns in the German weekly, Der Spiegel, and offering his advice on how German policymakers could do better. Sadly enough, his advice fell on deaf ears, something that Germany is currently paying a high price for. Willi does not only have a broad spectrum of research, he is also highly productive, as we already heard. I was always amazed by the number of papers he was capable of producing in a year, while I struggled to simply get 1 paper out. In a sense, it not only demonstrates his high level of scholarship, he also has a large network of colleagues and friends with whom he interacted regularly, intensively, and which in a sense was instrumental for his high level of productivity. This is what I really take away from the years I've worked and interacted with him. You cannot do it alone. Academic research, or any research for that matter, requires one to be in constant exchange with others. The fact that he's so easily approachable makes him not only a great teacher and mentor, but a true intellectual. Thank you, Willi, for that. But Willi is not only a prolific courser, he's also a dear friend. Despite the distance and the fact that he travels most likely even more than me, we always remained in touch and visited each other as often as possible. When my kids were younger, he was almost as a third grandfather to them, playing around the house whenever he was around. Unfortunately, the pandemic slowed down our mutual visits over the last few years. I do hope that with his retirement, we will have again more time to see each other. Willi, I wish you all the best for your retirement. I do hope that you will continue to share your knowledge and wisdom with all of us, whether in academic publications, talks, workshops, or simply over a glass of rosé next time I have the pleasure to welcome you again in Geneva. All the best to you, Willi, and I hope that you have more time now in retirement to enjoy your time with Anna, your wife, and your kids. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Ekkehard. We're still without Prakash, so I think that the best thing will to do will be to move on to Thomas, if you can hear me. Tom, I think
Sure.
if you
If
start
you can
speaking,
hear
there we
me
are.
as well, yes, that should work.
Yes, we can. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short. We're coming to the end of this, but let me point out an aspect of Willi's work which we have not talked about today and which I find very consequential in these current times. I work as an editor for economics at a newspaper that's read by the general public, and Willi is and has for a long time been an economics professor I can call. And by I can call, I do not really mean what happens most of the time when mass media and science meet. You know this. The journalist calls on top of the hour, asks a few undercomplex questions about the news of the day. The scientist provides a couple sound bites, roughly from their area of expertise. And in the end, one catchy sentence makes it into the newspaper, not always in the intended context. And I mean something more relevant, and at the same time, I fear less gratifying from the academic's perspective. People from outside of academic economics may have a hard time realizing how stupid everybody has become. I do not entirely mean it in the literal sense, I don't think so. It can just be observed that the very basics of economic thinking are simply not understood anymore by the general public that I write for. You see this, of course, in the current debate about tariffs and protectionism, where the libraries are full of rich empirical insights and fruitful debates, which could now very well inform a US government which wants to reset a system of what they think are unfair trade practices and inform the public debate. But instead, you all see what we're getting. The least informed, wrong, long disproven arguments are being thrown around by politicians, self-proclaimed talk show experts, and everybody else. And when I say that everybody is getting more stupid, this obviously applies to us, the media as well. And again, I'm not saying that my good friends and colleagues in my profession are all suffering from some form of brain rot. I'm just seeing that the system is changing, and there are two important developments happening. First, in the media, we experience that we need to explain more and more basics all over again, all the time to our readers. If not, we are misunderstood. And simple economic facts are lines of reasoning that I would not have put into my articles when I started as an intern 30 years ago. I have to very expressively state nowadays. For example, who pays for import tariffs? To which the complete answer, of course, is it's complicated. Read 100 books, please. But my job is simplify this, show a few relevant sides of the debate, but keep it along the lines of established insight and keep it complex. Don't oversimplify it. If you can, weed out the failures, the fallacies, which requires effort. And it requires effort to then argue and actually advocate for those arguments to our readers, because many of those do not believe us. They've heard easier explanations in a talk show the night before or from the American president. So the other development in my profession, of course, is that we are no longer trusted that much. Less and less people are willing to pay for what we're doing, which means that there are less and less resources, which is woman and manpower, to take the time to get to the bottom of some of those economic complexities which we're trying to explain. I'll just switch that. So what a journalist often needs is someone who can quickly explain such things, such as Willi Semmler. But let me avoid a misunderstanding here. What I need when I want to talk about tariff effects or capital flights or carbon trading regimes is not someone who reads me an excerpt from Economics 101. I can get this from opening a textbook or asking ChatGPT. I would not want to waste anybody's time with this, especially not Willi Semmler's. But what I usually need when I'm under time pressure, when there is news, when there is something happening that economics the economists can talk about, is a quick reference to the most relevant contemporary strains of the economic debate on this or that issue. 2, 3, 4 papers, a few names, and most of all, an intriguing spark, an idea which can take the debate further. And of course, when I ask Willi to contribute to this, when I call him, I hope to get a left-wing view, maybe an insight from heterodox strains of economics, something which will counter or enrich the mainstream debate, which tends to be a lot of the same all the time in the popularized versions. And sometimes when I had those conversations with Willi, he ended up very happy with me. We were, for example, able to publish quite prominently some of his work around the carbon emissions-based wealth tax idea, which has been mentioned today, and which is such an original approach for enriching both the wealth tax debate as the carbon tax debate. But unfortunately, in other cases, and there were more of those cases than the first kind, we had long talks. Willi would go down every conceivable rabbit hole available, but produce exactly 0 quotable sentences. So in these cases, he did not even get a mentioning in the paper, and I sent him a note of condolence. And next time we tried again. And I'm very, very grateful that Willi has taken the time and still takes the time to do this, and apparently sees value in doing so, and does, like myself, not give up on communicating ideas from economic thinking to the public. Or actually more, I believe that he treasures the opportunity that the media provides to inspire the public debate with new economic ideas or policy ideas. So I'm ending this with gratitude to Willi, and with gratitude for the fact that he will, between 2 Flammkuchen, find even more time answering my calls and those of my colleagues in coming years. So thank you, Willi. Lots of luck, and I'll call you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Unfortunately, Prakash has not been able to join us, so we've come to something of a premature end. But before we close and move next door for the reception, and stop the feed. That's a little bit better. Just two quick announcements. All right. 2 quick announcements. First of all, on behalf of Will Milberg and myself, I would just like to thank all of the panelists today, both those of you in the room and those online, and at the same time, thank the audience, both in the room and online. And the second and most important thing is an unannounced item on the program. I think the last word should go to the honoree himself. I'm going to just hand the microphone.
Does it work? Yeah. No, I will be very short. I know you're waiting for the reception now, the good stuff. So just some quick remarks. So I'm somewhat quite overwhelmed of all this praise and all the support and all the evaluation. And one sees somewhat is the unexpected diffusion of things that one does student diffusion. Dissertation. So this is amazing what came out today from myself too. What actually was I was doing in the last 40 years. So this was a great surprise. And let me thank in particular the organizing committee and Bill Milberg and Mark and Sylvina, of course, the department secretary, who was very, very active to make it nice organize event like today and organize all the other additional stuff that comes up. Exception now. I also want to thank the president, of course, and Teresa Gioladucci. They are very what is? Oh, so I see. Good. Okay. So they you gave a nice introduction to basically my work and my activity here, and that's what this stresses. So this enormous amount of work that topics and areas and from Marx and early Marx to econometrics and very sophisticated optimal control models. And I actually did all this because I was somewhat lucky that I had a 10 years fellowship in Germany from the German welfare state, so to speak, and could start anything I wanted to study. So I studied economics, philosophy, sociology, even some literature. My wife says, of course, your knowledge is not sufficient there. She is a literature expert. And that's why I had applied, so to speak, my research to many areas, because I had gone through many faculties there in Europe. And the new school is actually very interdisciplinary, and many faculty have different specializations, and a wonderful way is here to have joint seminars. And so since the 1930s, that introduced actually the Germans here to have these joint seminars and these interdisciplinary discussions. I also, of course, want to thank very heavily also my family, my the son, my daughter, and the significant others, and the daughter-in-law, and are here, and my wife is here. She did this, has a degree also in anthropology from the new school, so she knows the atmosphere here. But what though you can do all this stuff, so many subjects, writing many subjects, having many co-authors all over the world, and supporting many students, because of course the help from the family is also very important. I want to acknowledge this. And so also in some way the family allowed me to do what I wanted to do, and the new school allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And so I could do many papers and many books, and with many friends and all over the world, as you saw. The co-authors were here present. There was, of course, another element of the German state at that time when I studied, and later, that what was mentioned here before for David Abraham. I came to the US actually when the German state, particularly the German universities, did not allow the enter the German university with the left, from the left door. That was called the Berufsverbote. And I was there also nominated for a position, and I lost this position. And fortunately, I got a fellowship, postdoc fellowship from Columbia University, and ended up here. And this was a time, 1978, 79, where I met David first, and Joan is, I don't know if Joan's still here. There was a whole group of American intellectuals who helped the Germans at that time somewhat to fight against the Berufsverbote, the German policy not to let the Germans from the left door enter into the educational system, or the whole public sector. Actually, it was true. And so since that time, I know some of the persons here in the room. And as you know, these universities are the first area or an important area where the betterment takes place, so to speak, of want to change somewhat what has happened before. And you see this the same in the US here now. the universities are at the center where they cannot really to the commanding heights there, but they have many policies that they can restrict the universities at the moment in the US. And there is some similarity what happened in the German case in 1979 and what happens here now in the US. So I just wanted to mention this, and David was actually also referring to that period. So I get many questions and many suggestions at the end. Don't stop your research. That's very nice of you. So being confident that my energy is sufficient to continue with that. So I actually have plans already. So I will work as a research fellow at the YASA. It's a huge institute on sustainability. It's basically a think tank for the United Nations with 50, 60 nations on board and very large number of scientists. And so I will work mostly remotely, so for them. And Ibrahim, who was talking here, is already there in that institute, so I have some friends already there. And so that's what I want to do, continue the research on particular sustainability topics and climate change. And so you, this is, so to speak, my future somewhat. People ask me always, oh, well, what you're doing next? You have done so much, what you're doing next? And, so, and I also will still be available for the student. There are several dissertation students still going on with their work, and I still do some supervisory work. And I think the New School has some window of opportunity at the moment. Before the financial market crisis, it wasn't so easy to place New School students so in the international organizations, so ILO or IMF or World Bank or UN or research institutions. But then with the opening of the financial crisis, more and more New School students actually found jobs there in these institutions. They opened up. They found the traditional economics was too narrow, and here the are much broader at the New School, and which was important to get also jobs at those institutions. And I think the New School should somewhat cultivate these relationships with those big organizations, because there are a lot of important jobs in the future, particularly on topics that are not so much allowed anymore to do research on, you see, in the US in the future. You know what topic I mean. So the international organizations are very, very open for New School students. So, and with that, I also want to thank the students here at the New School who pushed me forward with a lot of challenges and ideas, and helped me to develop projects, but I also try to place them somewhere. And there is a door open at these institutions. So thank you very much for the audience, for everybody coming here, and for my friends who organized the session here. And now we have a reception, and everybody can relax now. Me too.